It started with a favor I didn't mean to offer. That night, the city felt heavier than usual, its air thick with rain and exhaust, the kind that clings to your clothes and slows your thoughts. I had just wrapped up a company dinner, smiling politely at every joke my boss made, nodding at every word he said. Mr. Hashem was the kind of man who owned every room he entered. Sharp, elegant, and distant. I'd been working under him for almost 3 years, and I'd learned one thing: he didn't tolerate mistakes, or emotions. When the dinner ended, the staff started leaving in 2s and 3s. Drivers pulled up, doors opened, umbrellas popped. I lingered near the entrance, holding my coat, when I saw him, Ryan, Mr. Hashem's son. He stood alone under the awning, hands tucked into his pockets, the rain tracing silver lines in the air around him. That he was nothing like his father. Where Mr. Hashem was controlled, Ryan looked undone in the most human way. His shirt slightly wrinkled, his gaze distant. I'd met him before, once or twice at company events, but he had been quieter than the rest. I'd assumed he was shy, maybe uninterested in small talk. But that night, when his car didn't show up and his father waved him off with a distracted, "Figure it out," something in me shifted. Before I could think, I said, "My place is nearby. You can wait out the rain there, and I'll call a car for you." He turned toward me, water glistening on his hair. "You sure? I don't want to bother you." "It's fine," I said. And maybe it was. Or maybe it wasn't. The ride to my apartment was quiet. The city outside blurred past, neon, puddles, streetlights bending through the mist. He leaned against the window, half listening to the radio, half lost in thought. When we reached my building, I handed him a towel and offered tea. He smiled faintly, saying, "You're a lifesaver," before settling onto the couch like he'd been there before. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping against the windows. Then he asked, "You've worked with my father a long time, haven't you?" 3 years, I said. "He's dedicated." Ryan laughed softly. "That's a polite word." I smiled, unsure how much I was allowed to agree. But something about the way he said it invited honesty. "He can be difficult," I admitted. "But he gets things done." Ryan nodded. "He gets everything done, except knowing who people really are." There was a weight in his words that I didn't know how to respond to. I wanted to ask what he meant, but his eyes were on the rain again. His face looked tired, not in a physical way, but in the kind of way that comes from pretending too long. That we talked after that, about the city, about university life abroad, about things that didn't matter and yet somehow did. He spoke about pressure, about being told who to be and what to want. I told him about working late nights, about living alone in an apartment that sometimes felt more like a waiting room than a home. At some point, he asked quietly, "Do you ever feel invisible, even when people seem to see you?" The question lingered. I wanted to say yes, but my voice wouldn't move. Instead, I just nodded. The clock ticked past midnight before I noticed he'd stopped talking. He was lying back on the couch, eyes closed, breathing soft. Asleep, maybe pretending. Either way, I stood there longer than I should have, watching the rhythm of his breath. There was something fragile about the scene, the quiet of two lives colliding by accident, both hiding different kinds of loneliness. That I pulled a blanket over him, turned off the lights, and sat by the window. Outside, the rain softened into a mist, and the street lamps blurred like ghosts. My phone buzzed once, Mr. Hashem's message, "Good work tonight." I looked at the screen, then at his son asleep on my couch, and felt something twist inside me that I wasn't sure what it was: pity, guilt, or something else I didn't dare name. But I knew one thing: whatever started tonight wouldn't end neatly. That I in the distance, thunder rolled over the city like a warning, and as I watched the first light of dawn touch his face, I realized that my life, careful and controlled for so long, had just stepped into dangerous territory. That night, without meaning to, I had crossed the line between loyalty and longing, and there was no going back. When Ryan left the next morning, he thanked me like people do when they mean more than their words. Aloud he stood at the door, hair still damp from a quick shower, wearing the same clothes from the night before. His smile was faint but sincere. "You didn't have to do all that," he said. I know, I replied. But I wanted to. For a moment, we just looked at each other, two people pretending that the silence between them didn't mean something, that was supposed to be it. One night, one act of kindness. But some connections don't end where they should. A few days later, he texted. Are you free for coffee? I typed and deleted my reply 3 times before answering, sure. We met at a quiet cafe near my office, one of those places where the air smells like rain and roasted beans. He talked about his father's business trips, his mother's polite distance, and the hollow comfort of luxury. I listened. Maybe too closely. After that, coffee became a pattern. Once a week. Then twice. Then it wasn't about coffee at all, it was about having someone who saw through the surface. Someone who didn't treat him like the boss's son or a reflection of someone else's success. That he began stopping by my place again. Sometimes after work, sometimes on random evenings when the city felt too loud for him. We'd sit on the balcony, watching headlights move like quiet rivers below. He'd talk, I'd listen. He had a way of filling the silence that made it feel warm, not heavy. That I knew it was dangerous. Not because of what people might think, but because of what I was beginning to feel. That it wasn't supposed to be this. I told myself that every time he laughed at one of my bad jokes, every time his voice softened when he said my name. It was just friendship. Empathy. Nothing more. But lies whispered often enough start sounding like truth. One evening, he showed up without calling. I opened the door to find him standing there with a tired smile and eyes that looked like they'd been holding back storms. Rough day. I asked that he nodded and walked past me into the living room. My father wants me to join the company full time, he said, collapsing on the couch. He thinks I'm wasting time trying to find myself. Maybe he just wants you to be safe, I offered. Ryan looked up. Safe or obedient? The question lingered like smoke. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know what the worst part is? He thinks he knows me. But he doesn't. Not really. There was something trembling behind his words. A confession trying to escape. That I sat beside him. Then who does know you? He looked at me then, really looked. The kind of gaze that makes time feel slower, heavier. You do, he said quietly. You see me when no one else does. The room fell silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven. Every instinct told me to step back, to say something light and harmless. But I didn't move. Instead, I said, maybe that's why this feels so wrong. He smiled sadly. Does it? The distance between us was small but filled with everything we hadn't said. He reached out, not for a touch, not for a kiss, but for reassurance. His fingers brushed mine, and the world seemed to pause for a single impossible moment. No words, no promises. Just silence and understanding, and then, just as suddenly, he pulled back. I should go, he whispered. Ryan. He shook his head. If I stay, I'll say things I can't take back. The door closed softly behind him, but his absence filled the room like a weight I couldn't shake. Hours later, my phone buzzed. It was him. If love comes in the wrong shape, does it still count as love? I stared at the message, heart racing. I didn't reply. Maybe because I didn't know the answer, or because I already did. The next morning, Mr. Hashim called me into his office. His tone was calm but his eyes sharp. Adil, I've been meaning to ask, you've been spending time with my son lately? My throat tightened. Just helping him adjust after returning. He smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Good. He needs someone responsible around him. I nodded, but my pulse wouldn't settle. The air felt too still. Too quiet. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed again, Ryan calling. I didn't pick up. When the call ended, a message appeared, he knows. The screen dimmed, and my reflection stared back at me in the dark glass, half afraid, half certain that the secret I'd been guarding was no longer mine to keep, and in that silence, I realized, every confession comes with a price. The next morning, sunlight poured through the hostel windows as if nothing had happened. But inside me, everything felt different. I went about my classes as usual, yet my mind kept returning to that quiet room, the sound of rain, and the words we never said. When I saw Mr. Ayan in the corridor, he greeted everyone with the same calm smile. But when his eyes met mine, there was a brief silence, a flicker of understanding that neither of us could ignore. He looked away quickly, adjusting the file in his hands, and continued walking. That single moment told me everything had changed. Days passed like that. We both carried on as if nothing was unusual, but the distance between us felt carefully built, not out of anger, but out of fear. I respected that distance because I knew it came from wisdom, not coldness. He was protecting both of us from something we could never explain to the world. During lectures, I could sense when his attention shifted my way for a split second. During meetings, his tone softened when he addressed me. It was subtle, yet enough to remind me that our bond was still there, invisible but alive. A few weeks later, rumors began to circle around the campus. Some students whispered that I was getting special treatment. It wasn't true, but rumors rarely need truth to grow. I tried to ignore them, but I noticed how the principal started avoiding public interactions with me even more. One afternoon, I found a small note in the library, folded neatly between the pages of a book I had once borrowed from his office. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. The note said, "Some lessons in life are not found in books. They are felt once and remembered forever." I held the paper for a long time, unsure whether to feel comforted or broken. That small message carried the weight of everything we couldn't say aloud. Later that week, he called me to his office one last time. His tone was professional when he asked me to sit, but his eyes told a different story. The files on his desk were gone, replaced by a single mug of tea and a half-written letter. That he spoke quietly. "I wanted to thank you for helping during the event and for your dedication to your studies. You've done well." I smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. You've always inspired me." He paused for a moment before continuing, "You're finishing this term soon. After that, you'll have a new journey ahead. Keep your focus there. Don't let anything, or anyone, hold you back." I understood what he meant, though he never said it directly. It wasn't a farewell in words, it was a farewell in intention. He was reminding me to let go with grace. The air between us felt heavy again. I wanted to say something, to thank him for understanding me in ways no one else ever had. But before I could, he smiled gently and said, "Sometimes, the right thing to do is to walk away before feelings become mistakes." That single sentence stayed with me. It wasn't a rejection, it was a lesson, a reminder that love, in its purest form, isn't always about possession. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop. That I stood up, nodded respectfully, and left the room. Outside, the evening sky glowed with orange light, just like the first day I had joined college. But now, I wasn't the same person. Weeks later, I graduated. During the ceremony, he handed me my certificate. Our hands brushed for a moment, a brief touch that carried months of silence and a lifetime of meaning. He whispered only one word, "Proud." That was the last time we spoke. Years have passed since that night, yet I still remember it clearly, not as a secret, but as a story that taught me something profound. It taught me that real connections don't always end with grand gestures or promises. Sometimes, they end quietly, leaving behind lessons that shape who we become. Whenever it rains, I think of that office light glowing through the darkness, a reminder of a night that changed two lives forever, because some stories are not about what happened after the door opened, they're about what we learned once it closed.